Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on ensuring consumers shop sustainably. We have today Lidl and Deloitte as guest speakers, so I'm very happy to welcome them. I am Géraldine Noé. I am Head of Environment at Business in the Community Northern Ireland, and I am delighted to welcome you all this afternoon. I hope you are here with a nice cup of tea. This webinar is the last one actually of our spring series NI case studies on climate action. You can find the other webinars from this series and the ones we hosted in December on our YouTube channel. These series of webinars are part of our Business Action on Climate campaign, where we want to challenge and support all businesses in Northern Ireland to address the climate emergency. Wherever you are on your climate journey, you can sign our climate action pledge and commit to reducing your greenhouse gas emission and join a growing movement of companies committed to act in collaboration on this crucial issue. And if you don't know where to start on your climate journey, do get in touch with us. We have a range of support available to help you get started. So back to today's webinar, if we look at the agenda, we are here together for 45 minutes. I'm delighted to welcome our guest speakers. So we'll hear first from Ben Richards, Director in the Climate Change and Sustainability team at Deloitte, and then from Nathan Curry, Facilities Manager at Lidl Northern Ireland. So you are both very welcome. And they will be telling us about what is happening in the retail sector and on the consumer end of this, of the journey. We will have time for a Q&A at the end, so please do type your questions in the chat box or in the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. And yeah, let's get started. So we have a very short quiz to get you started and to just kick off this webinar. So what percentage of the carbon footprint of a pint of milk happens at the retail stage? So happens in the supermarket, basically. Answer 1, 7%. Answer 2, 27%. Answer 3, 47%. Or answer 4, 77%. So you should be able to vote in a few seconds. There you go. So what percentage of the carbon footprint of a pint of milk happens in the supermarket? I'll give you a couple of minutes to vote. Couple more, 10 more seconds. Okay, can we have a look at the results, please, Claire? So the correct answer was 27%. So 25% of you have found the answer. Just to give you a bit of a detail, so almost 70%, 69% exactly, happen at farm level. So that's the methane from the cow, the farming CO2, and the farming nitrous oxide that go to your bottle of milk. And 27% happen at because of refrigeration and retail overheads. And the remaining 4% are retail packaging and transport. So there you go. This is, by the way, this figure comes from the book How Bad Are Bananas? The Carbon Footprint of Everything by Mike Berners-Lee, which I highly recommend if you'd like to know more about the carbon footprint of stuff. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Ben Richards to give us his presentation. Ben, you are very welcome.
Hi, Geraldine. Thank you so much for having me, and good afternoon, everyone today. So my name is Ben Richards. I'm a director in the Climate Change and Sustainability practice at Deloitte UK. In terms of the introduction that I'm going to give today, I suppose really what I wanted to do was just set out some of the frames that help us think about sustainability, climate change, decarbonisation, net zero, these kind of themes in a way that help to catalyse action and will help to drive forward the conversation in your organisation. So we're going to look at this through the lens of 3 frames. Each of these frames, I think, helps us to do exactly what it says on the slide there. So rewrite the future of our organisations, rewrite the future for us as society, rewrite the future for our business models and each of our organisations. So that's really what we're looking to do today. The frame that I always like to start with is on the next slide, please, and that's the environmental frame. So I think whenever we're coming at a challenge like this or a conversation like this, in the first instance, it's really important to bear in mind what we're working towards here. And for this, I always go back to this broad goal that was set out a couple of years ago. So roughly what we need to do is halve the amount of emissions we're producing, and that's the absolute minimum we must achieve if we're to have a chance of safeguarding humanity from the worst impacts of climate change. So this quote comes from Christiana Figueres. She was the architect of the Paris Agreement, and I think I like to use this as the kind of key frame, because this is the piece that we can't negotiate with anymore. So really, we're going to have to think really creatively, really robustly about how we achieve halving emissions in the next decade or so, if we're going to prevent these worst impacts of climate change. I also thoroughly recommend her book, The Future We Choose, if anyone's interested in exploring this thematically in a bit more detail. I think if we jump to the next slide, the good news is that you don't really have to persuade people about the science of climate change anymore, though, and that for lots of working in this space has been the challenge for the last 15, 20, 30, 40 years in some instances, because now I think there's a really clear mandate from our stakeholders to drive change and start to put zero business models and decarbonisation programs into action. So the pressure, as we think about it, typically comes from 3 key stakeholder groups, and that there might be more depending on what kind of organisation you work in. But critically, about pressure coming from consumers. So we know that consumers want to see change. I think each of us as consumers can put ourselves in these shoes quite easily as well. So our research shows that 43% of consumers are already choosing brands due to their environmental creds, and around 2/3 of Britons would support carbon labels, which is great news. But beyond that, we've also got the regulatory push and the investor push. So in the UK government has now mandated disclosure against the TCFD framework. The UK's own 2050 net zero commitment is also going to be kind of trickling down through organisations of all shapes and sizes over the next 30 years. And I think in some sectors, healthcare, for instance, where the NHS have put in place a 2055 net zero target, lots of companies in the healthcare industry, in the pharma space, are already thinking about what that might mean for their organisation and how they change and how they start to transition. So the regulatory nudge is a really compelling one. Beyond that, you've got the investor push, and we're going to come back to investors in a minute and talk a bit about and the implications of this sort of investor awakening, both for listed businesses and non-listed organisations as well. If we jump to the next slide, we've got a quick plug for our Shifting Sands research. So this is an annual piece of research that Deloitte commissions to really kind of deep dive on what consumers are thinking about when it comes to ethical, the intersection between sustainability and climate and the choices that they make every day. So I think some interesting, so 2/3 of consumers claim to have reduced their use of single-use plastics over the last year, and then this was actually data taken from our 2020 survey. The new 2021 survey is coming out in a few weeks, so watch this space for some new research there. We've touched on that point that 43% of consumers are already applying a sort of environmental value judgment to their choice of brands, and around 1/3 of consumers are making choices about which brands they shop with based on their ethical credentials. So This shows that sustainability really is racing up the agenda for consumers, and I think gives a really clear mandate here for brands to be taking action. I think before we move on, it's also worth just considering employees here. So we also know that employees would rather work for brands that are more ethically oriented, and you know, we see brands like Unilever are often top the polls in terms of the number of candidates they attract per place. Sustainability becoming a really critical part of the mix from a hiring perspective as well, but lots of you, I'm sure, will already know that from your own first-hand experience. If we jump to the next slide, looks like there might be just a slight delay here. Okay, this is where we start to think about the impact of some of these investors coming to terms with the need for climate action and the transition to net zero. So at the bottom of the slides, you know, there are various headlines that demonstrate financial organisations from across sort of financial subsectors, so whether that's insurance or banking or investments, are all now starting to think about how to integrate climate change into their lending and investment processes. So this is an increasingly big issue. Beyond that, you've also got obviously the piece around financing the transition. So those same organisations thinking about how they get the right capital to the right organisations in order to decarbonise the economy and hit that goal of halving emissions by 2030. I think the really stuff though comes when we look at that Larry Fink quote. So it's important to recognise that net zero demands a transformation of the entire economy. So this is a notion that I think has been familiar to lots of us working in sustainability for many years. But now, I think over the next decade, the rubber will really hit the road. And this doesn't just affect organisations that BlackRock are investing in. So whether you're public or privately held, this is kind of coming for you one way or another. And there is an increasing mandate to either change and lean into the transition or be changed. You know, organisations that don't start to adapt, those organisations that don't start to transform, will be left behind. And I think it's probably still feeling like lots of organisations that might be tier 2 or 3 suppliers of large brands with net zero commitments might be able to slightly hide from the transition. But I think with the issue or the emissions rising up the agenda really quickly, that's only going to be the case for a matter of months or years. So there's going to be nowhere really for those organisations to hide, and this transformation is next slide please. So the third frame we're going to be thinking about is a business resilience frame, and so this really, I think, is where every organisation can start to get their head around what a net zero future might look like for their organisation. So one of the tools quite frequently with clients is scenario analysis, and scenario analysis helps our clients to really figure out how their organisation might look or feel different in different scenarios, and to test whether they are strategically resilient in each of those scenarios. So the 4 scenarios that are up on screen here at the moment came from a paper that we produced with the Met Office, and basically kind of sets out 4 different versions of the future, specifically thinking about consumer businesses and how their businesses might start to look different in a sustainable world versus, say, a world that continues to run on fossil fuels. So these futures help to kind of pry apart all the different possibilities that the future presents, and helps our clients to sort of model the resilience of their business within those scenarios. So this is a really, really powerful tool to help the resilience of your organisation, because I think lots of organisations haven't really come to the terms with the fact that their business model might be unsustainable in a world informed by climate change, which is the world that is coming, whether we adapt and reduce emissions collectively, or whether we choose a path that is arguably more volatile and a future that you know, continues to see levels of fossil fuels rise. So that sort of sets it out from a conceptual point of view. I also think it's worth, and if we go to the next slide, please, exploring the future from a science perspective. So as well as thinking about scenario planning from the perspective of strategic resilience, the other thing that we encourage our clients to do is think about what these different versions of the future might look like for their consumers and for their customers. So in the report that I've just mentioned, so our Met Office report, you will find 3 different pairs of sets of consumers. So we've got Darren, Patrick and Laurie and Grace, model consumers, and we show what the future might look like and feel like for each of them. So Darren, in a sustainable scenario, had retrained from being an oil and gas engineer to electric vehicles. Patrick are our sort of super high net worth couple. They find their year looks very different, so they're not jet setting around like maybe they were in the past, but in the future they embrace slow travel and mix work and let them move around the world slowly and sustainably. And Grace thinks quite carefully about how she's bringing up her children. Ultimately goes fully vegan and never buys a car. So consumer choice is looking very different in a world informed by climate change, and scenarios can really help to bring that to life. So on the next slide, please, we set out a bit of a pathway for some of the things that we're seeing, some of the ways that we've noticed clients starting to think about and embrace both the challenges, but more significantly, the opportunities around the net zero future and the net zero transition. So some of the things, maybe we'll just focus on those examples of action across the bottom of the slide here, but one of the sort of journeys we're exploring with one of our clients at the moment is going from maybe some of the more predictable stuff around the electric vehicle delivery fleet, but also then planning some more innovative things for the midterm, such as a zero waste store and an investment in vertical farming. And through the term, some of the bigger, more innovative pieces around sustainable bonds, but also then eco-labelling, which we think is going to be quite a significant part of the future for consumer. I think if we also consider some of the basics that organisations should be considering today, I mean, top tips are, first of all, work out what your emissions profile looks like today, if you're ready. From there, start thinking about where the opportunities to reduce those emissions might sit, and think about that from an absolute reduction point of view in the first instance. But offsetting is a conversation that is coming back with a vengeance. It's been a little bit unfashionable for a few years, but it's that's something that's coming back with a bang. And then beyond that, I think absolutely embracing the principles of the TCFD framework, or the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, is something that our leading clients are also doing. So those are the kind of key recommendations to make sure that your organisation is sort of fit for a future informed by climate change, and is absolutely part of that movement of organisations that are starting to really decarbonise with a vengeance. So one final slide from me, just to give you a pointer to some additional resources that we've got online. We've got our Shifting Sands research and also our Responsible Business blog. And you'll also find my contact details in this slide pack as well, should you want to continue the conversation. We're working with lots of organisations a bit like yours, and would love to have a chat if that's useful. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Ben. That was really interesting. I'm going to leave the floor to Nathan now, who will give us a bit of insight on what Lidl is doing in their stores to make sure that consumers can be reassured and say and know that when they go into a Lidl supermarket, they are shopping sustainably. Unfortunately, Nathan's webcam is not working today, so there will be just a podcast for you. And also, I just wanted to remind the audience that you can type your questions in the chat box or in the questions box. Nathan, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Geraldine. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm having some webcam issues, so a podcast format we'll have to do. So yes, my name is Nathan. I'm the facilities manager for Lidl Northern Ireland. And today I just want to discuss a bit about our sustainability strategy at Lidl and what that encompasses. The next slide there. So yeah, in the next short while, I'll discuss Lidl's sustainability strategy and touch on some of our recent energy initiatives, how we manage our material waste, and a section on our biodiversity strategy as well. Next slide there, yeah. And again. So as a quick introduction to Lidl, Lidl first opened its doors in Cookstown in 1999, so over 20 years ago. Since then, we've enjoyed strong growth in Northern Ireland and opened our 41st store recently in February of this year on the Crumlin Road in North Belfast. We still have ambitious expansion plans and are committed to at least 50 stores in Northern Ireland. As a company, we directly employ approximately 1,000 people in Northern Ireland and support an additional 2,500 jobs indirectly through supply chain and local businesses. And Lidl are currently the fastest growing food retailer in Northern Ireland. We move on to the next slide. So we believe we have a responsibility to build a successful, sustainable future, not just for our own business, but for the communities that we serve. This commitment is embedded in our corporate social responsibility strategy titled A Better Tomorrow, which sets out clear, ambitious sustainability targets across 4 key pillars: responsible sourcing, protecting the environment, Team Lidl, and Lidl Community Works. Our strategy focuses on those areas that are the most material to our business, important to our stakeholders, and where we can have the greatest impact. This presentation will focus on our work in the protecting the environment pillar, specifically on operational initiatives. However, the entire strategy is available online at abettertomorrow-lidl.ie. So move on to the next slide there. Yeah. So some of our energy initiatives. So Lidl Northern Ireland seek continuous improvement of energy performance in order to limit our outputs to the environment and improve organizational competitiveness. All of our operations are certified to the ISO 50001 energy management standard. And there are numerous measures which help to contribute to maintaining these standards, such as LED lighting. So LED strip lighting is implemented across all stores in Northern Ireland. Additionally, as of February this year, we completed a project to upgrade our spotlights and emergency lights to LED where required. These LED lights allow us to realize a reduction in lighting usage by approximately 60%. On top of that, all lights in our back of house areas and stores are on PIR motion sensors, which ensures that we don't have any areas in the back of house which aren't unnecessarily lit. And this also means that there are no light switches in any Lidl store. EV chargers. So as a company, we have 94 EV chargers across all sites for staff vehicle charging. Approximately 90% of the staff vehicle fleet is either hybrid or electric. We also offer dedicated customer vehicle charging across 10 of our sites. These chargers are included in all new stores going forward and actually forms the largest network in the Northern Ireland supermarket sector. Now, whilst EV chargers are an investment by Lidl, we know that with more and more customers shopping with us every week, the expansion of the network of public charge points will make electric vehicles more attractive to customers, but will also cost our customers nothing to be more environmentally friendly. We not only want to ensure we're being a sustainable company, but we also want to ensure we're encouraging and supporting the wider public to address environmental problems. We believe that as we develop our EV stations, we can help Northern Ireland commit to greener forms of transport. We also have solar panels, which have been retrofitted to 2 stores across Northern Ireland, and plans to include these in new builds for any south-facing stores going forward. To put a figure on the energy savings that can be achieved with solar panels, we found it's in and around 25% of the store's usage can be generated by solar energy. If we move on to the next slide there. So through our energy providers, we were able to make a switch to green electricity in 2018, which has resulted in a direct carbon emissions reduction in our energy generation usage of 70%. Additionally, all Lidl stores are fitted with building management systems, which control all of the heating and all of the lighting. This ensures that heating is on only when staff and customers are in store, that only 100% of the lighting is on when customers are in store as well. On top of that, all doors on our back of house walk-in freezers and chillers are alarmed to ensure they're not left open. And all fridges on the shop floor as well are fitted with blinds that drop at night time, which reduce energy consumption during non-opening hours by up to 30%. Our new stores then, so Lidl have and continue to invest in new concept stores with numerous sustainability features that reduce our environmental footprint. These stores are designed with features such as LED, energy efficient lighting, highly thermally efficient glazing and building construction, and new heat recovery systems, which allow up to 70% of the existing heat from our extract air to be reused. Perhaps a more visible example of sustainable construction in our new stores are that the roofs of our new stores are constructed using wooden glulam beams as opposed to conventional steel. The reasons being they can be produced using up to 40% less energy than steel equivalents, and wood, as we know, is a sustainable product. So if we move on to the next slide, so we'll talk a bit now about material and waste management. As a discount retailer, we know that resource efficiency is a key differentiator for our business in the marketplace and has numerous implications as we all shift towards a low carbon economy. At Lidl, we're proud to boast an award-winning recycling and waste management program. Our in-store and warehouse waste management concept is central to our zero waste commitment. So what does this look like? As an example, all Lidl stores are fitted with cardboard balers. So these cardboard bales are then collected and recycled by external service providers. All plastics, metals and textiles are returned to the warehouses where they again are recycled by external providers. And these things, among others, help make sure that we're currently diverting 100% of our waste from landfill, and we're working hard to maintain this. As regards food redistribution, Lidl have worked with a company known as Food Cloud over the last number of years, and we've seen the benefit of redistributing surplus food and helping local charities meet the demand their service users have for food, whilst also reducing waste in the supply chain. The Lidl Feed It Back network, powered by Food Cloud, uses a digital platform to connect each of our stores with local charities to donate surplus food up to 4 days per week. In 2018, our donations created over 165,000 meals for those in need across Northern Ireland, saving a network of over 60 charities in excess of £225,000 and allowing them to redirect these funds back into their core services. So that's a brief overview of how we manage our own waste, but we're also seeking ways to reduce our customer waste. In October 2018, we became the first supermarket to scrap black plastic packaging. This followed on from an announcement earlier in 2018 where we committed to using 20% less plastic packaging by 2022 and to have 100% recyclable own brand packaging by 2025. We've been reducing the volume of packaging on our fruit and veg range, with 25% of our fruit and veg range now loose. This means there's less waste in our customers' households. A single example of this is the introduction of our innovative biodegradable banding on our fair trade organic bananas, which resulted in a reduction of 10,000 kilograms of plastic annually. We've also removed completely the unrecyclable polystyrene and black plastic trays in our fruit and veg, and have substituted them for cardboard or clear trays, and have also installed recycling stations in all stores so customers can choose to leave behind excess packaging after their purchases. If we move on to the next section here, biodiversity. So this is a topic that's becoming more and more prevalent, but what is biodiversity? Essentially, it forms the basis for functioning ecosystems and for food, clean water, clean air, etc. As a food retailer, we believe we have a responsibility to minimize negative impacts on food and water supply and proactively engage in ensuring these thrive. We can do this in two ways. Firstly, through our operations, and secondly, through our products and supply chain. Areas which can contribute to biodiversity imbalance include climate change from carbon emissions and pollution of the environment using fertilizers, chemicals, pesticides, etc. We believe we can have a positive impact by ensuring we have dedicated garden, plant and organic ranges. This gives customers a greater choice of choosing environmentally friendly products. We also have a strict policy that our products which do contain any pesticides, chemicals, etc., may contain no more than a third of the maximum levels permitted under EU law. Operationally then, so we're currently working on implementing pollinator-friendly areas. The reason behind this is that a third of our bee species are threatened with extinction in Ireland, and we recently signed up to the All-Ireland Pollinator Plan to work to change this trend. Measures such as wildflower meadows, insect hotels, planting native tree areas will help in protecting native insect species and, importantly, help raise awareness in local communities that these are situated in. We currently have this in place at our Nuts Corner warehouse near Crumlin, and also our newly relocated Newtonard store. We also have plans to implement these measures in a further 5 stores in 2021. Lastly then, so we recently announced that we have become the first retailer in the UK and Ireland to launch a fully green transport fleet powered by waste to energy generation in partnership with local logistics company McCullough Transport. So this consists of a fleet of 8 biomethane powered trucks and represents a major step forward to slash our carbon emissions. In the coming weeks, McCullough will start to use the food waste collected from all 41 Lidl Northern Ireland stores to create fully renewable biomethane gas to power these delivery trucks. And this will mean that these trucks will reduce their carbon emissions by up to 93%. If we move on then. So a few recommendations to finish. So if I were to make a few recommendations in moving forward with reducing business impact on the environment, they would be start small with what you know and what you have. Something as simple as changing out the light bulbs in your workspace for LEDs. Secondly, focus on internal collaboration. So across the business, utilize knowledge from different people, different departments. This is an excellent way to gather information, implement change, and create a unified agenda. And lastly, I suppose utilize external support. Perhaps they look like webinars like these, or talking across sectors, seeking opinions and feedback on your operations. For example, there are numerous firms out there that for little or no cost will analyze your utilities, such as water, and give feedback on these and suggest measures for lowering consumptions. So that is everything I wanted to say. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Nathan. That was really inspiring. I didn't know half of what you mentioned in terms of initiatives, and the biogas one is really really strikes me as innovative. So thank you for this presentation. That was really interesting. If Ben, you can come back with your camera, or otherwise I'll be alone, which is fine. I wanted to have few questions from the audience, and just everyone, please remember you can type your questions in the question box. Maybe Ben, if I start with you, what in the various discussions that you have with your clients, what do you see the main challenge is, or the main challenges are rather, to ambitiously and boldly addressing the climate topic?
Really good question. I suppose data is often the issue in the first instance. So I think while organisations are getting much better at understanding their scope 1 and 2 footprints, scope 3 is still a big challenge for lots of organisations, and thinking in a sort of connected cross-value chain way, area where lots of organisations are still struggling, and rightly so. You know, it's really difficult to think systemically about some of these challenges. So that's one of the areas. I think another particular challenge is probably around board and executive knowledge, subject knowledge. So getting your head around climate change obviously requires massively upskilling in terms of content, in terms of ways of working. It in many ways involves sort of unlearning lots of the kind of norms and the traditional kind of accepted rules of business and learning new ones, basically. And so that's a really big thing for leadership teams and boards to get their head around. I think the other area is, and this is something we sort of tried to do with our report with the Met Office actually, it's still not totally clear what a vision of a net zero future actually looks like for lots of organisations. So lots of our work, I guess, involves helping clients to really what that future could look like for them, thinking both about the challenges of a different operating context, but also the enormous opportunities that come with this as well. So those are probably the three areas, I'd say. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And I fully agree with you that the vision, I think, is usually is very negative, and what we need to build now together is something that looks like a future that is possible and that we want to live in. So so thank you for this. If I stay on the challenge, Nathan, moving to you, what would you say were the biggest challenges you faced when you implemented the various projects you mentioned? You can choose one, maybe the energy efficiency or the energy one. What were the biggest challenges that you faced?
Yeah, really good question, Géraldine. So energy initiatives, implementing the, I suppose, the LED lighting. There was across the portfolio of dozens of stores, the cost can build up quite quickly in that. So there was quite a bit of tendering, I suppose, but all of the lighting and contractors are all Northern Ireland based. It's also significant to undertake those works, so they all had to be done at night time. An issue we come up against with solar panels is planning permission, to be honest. It's difficult or slow a lot of the time to get planning permission, and there are certain areas which they just can't be implemented in. So the likes of our store in Hollywood Exchange, exclusively because of the glare effect that they would have on airplanes flying by nearby the airport. So
Okay, so very practical challenges then.
Very practical challenges, yes.
Maybe we probably have time for just for one more question for each one of you. Ben, on the responsible choices from consumers, I imagine that that's something that will be published in the research that you're going to release very soon. But what are the biggest impacts of COVID on those responsible choices that the consumers make, if any?
Yeah,
really?
that's a good question. Yeah, good question. I mean, I think it's probably been a little bit polarizing, to be honest. So I think there are some areas that have maybe slowed down in terms of enthusiasm. Areas where largely actually through the leadership of businesses have kind of moved forward and accelerated. So I think from memory, I think we saw a slight decrease this year in the number of consumers claiming to have chosen a brand for ethical reasons, or only a very, very slight decrease. And I think areas like flying are obviously down as well. So that's really been imposed not through choice, but through necessity, right? So that's from a consumer point of view. But I mean, I'm also thinking about this from a leadership perspective. So we've also got some recently published research with executive teams, and there I think we've seen about an equal proportion. I think it's about a third that have said they've slowed stuff down over the last year, but a third who have recognised that there is real opportunity ahead of the transition and accelerating the transition. And so that third have said they've actually done down and done even more on climate change this year. So yeah, there's not a consistent response there really. And I think of the two, it's probably more important that leadership teams keep up the pace actually and keep the pressure on. I think one of the other key findings from the consumer research is that consumers still don't feel they have the right information to make good sustainable choices. And in order for consumers to have the right information, you need the brands to have the right information. So this has to start, I think, with organizations and with the businesses in terms of them having the right kind of content and enabling the right kind of consumer choices so that consumers can do the right thing.
Great. And to and to stay on the consumer side, Nathan, what kind of response or dialogue have you had on the various projects that you've run? Mainly probably the waste one was the most impactful for the consumers. What kind of response have you had from them?
Yeah, the response, especially to the introduction of recycling stations in our stores from customers was great, and we see a strong usage in all of our stores. You know, even small things, we see like customers sort of unboxing some of their products and leaving the boxes in stores, just so they can take less waste home with them. All of that waste then gets returned to our warehouse, where it's fully sorted to make sure everything can be recycled.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much, both of you. Thank you for speaking at this webinar. Thank you to our audience for attending. You will find all those webinars on our YouTube channel, and if our speakers agree, we will be sharing the slides with the participants. That's it for us today. So have a lovely afternoon, and take care.